Hello and welcome to the Bhagavatam. It's not easy to find your spiritual path. Many of us struggle through many different processes. We go through various explorations. Some folks struggle with religion. They come into a religion and then sometimes they find that that religion doesn't quite satisfy them or doesn't quite fulfill them. Others go into atheism. And atheism itself can have its own loopholes, a sense of emptiness, that lack of connection to life, and so many questions that remain unanswered. Each person thinks they're right. Each person thinks they know. And each person lives in their own little bubble, an echo chamber. But the truth is this, that we're all struggling. We're all trying to find our way. Many come to spirituality through a new age path. Others come through a very impersonal path, thinking that spirituality is about energy, the light, the universe. Others come to bhakti or devotion. But however you come to spirituality, things that will bring you down. Now, in religious terms, they'll talk about 7 deadly sins, or they'll talk about various other things that, could be a deterrent. Even just not believing might be a big deterrent, a big problem on the path. Having doubts in your faith. But in bhakti, there is something very unique. It is when we offend, not God, because God doesn't take offense to things, but He does take offense to our criticism, judgment, put downs of His devotees, of His loved ones. We're going to explore a story around those lines, and we're going to see how this works. Why is judgment such a terrible thing? I mean, we think it's pretty normal. Most of us will criticize ourselves, we will criticize each other, we'll criticize our partner, our friends, the country, the politicians, everything. We'll criticize the way somebody brought us a meal at the restaurant or served us at the grocery store or whatever it is, right? We'll always find something that wasn't okay. Very rare is it that you can find someone who is not caught up in this trap of judgment. I remember for myself, one of the earliest realizations I'd had was that judgment was something I didn't like. And when I heard the line that, "Judge not lest you be judged," I was like, wow, I like this one. I like this. And I decided not to judge others. And it was quite like a determination, a vow, like it really had a strong impact. But because I followed that, I found my mind more peaceful. I found that I was able to accept more people. I was able to be more open to the differences between myself and others. I was kinder with myself. And I was happier. So I don't know what your path on or relationship to judgment has been. But for most people who come to me as a therapist, when they come, they tell me about their inside story. Very often, I think almost all the time, at the core is their self-judgment, is the ways in which they're hard upon themselves, is the ways in which they're critical of themselves. And that messes up their confidence, their self-esteem. It messes up their levels of happiness, their relationships. It messes up everything. So we're going to learn about judgment at a different level. Krishna is going to teach us about judgment through the Srimad Bhagavatam. And in one of these beautiful narratives lies a deep lesson. So one day, all the young boys of the Yadu dynasty went to a small forest to play. And after playing for a long time, they became thirsty. So the Yadu dynasty, just to kind of give you a recap here, is Krishna's family. Krishna, if you're joining for the first time, is the supreme being who incarnated on this earth 5,000 years ago. Some would say around 5000 BC, so that would make it actually 7,000 years ago. But whatever the details of that are, the point being, it was quite a while back, at a time when the world was somewhat different. And we had highly evolved beings on this planet. We had people who were highly evolved and who could do things that today to us seem impossible. But just as our technologies would seem impossible to people of those times or for any other time, we've developed material sciences. We've developed technology that has to do with matter, with the world. We've taken the forces of nature, we've tried to harness them, we've tried to make things happen in the external world. But in the process, we've forgotten about the internal world. We've given very little importance to that. Check and see the national budget for a country, how much of it is devoted to the internal world of people. At the most, they'll be looking at their psychology, at best. But when it comes to their spiritual path, well, then it's just about religion. And there might be some importance given to that. For the most part, it's about economic development, and it's about development of material sciences and technologies, which are good, and they have their place. But they've come at the cost of developing ourselves. Anyway, so when Krishna was here, there were a very different set of circumstances, very different set of technologies, and a very different kind of people that inhabited the earth. So we're talking about the Yadu dynasty. This is Krishna's family who were living on the island of Dwarka, which is on the coast of Gujarat. The island eventually sank, and today remnants of that place can be found dating back to that time. So we know that it was a real thing and a real time and a real place. And this is now the information we're getting from great sages who lived around that time, who were witness to those events. So the Yadu dynasty, Krishna was the king of that and had many, many subjects and vast army and a very powerful kingdom. But now we're going to a little intimate story. So the little boys had gone to the forest to play. They're the kids of the families that lived over there. And after playing for a long time, they became thirsty. And as they searched for water, they looked inside and they found a well. The well was dry, there was no water in it, but inside the well they saw a peculiar creature. The boys were astonished to behold this creature. It was a lizard, but it was a huge lizard, a gigantic lizard. They felt sorry for it and tried to lift it out of the well. Reminds me of some kind of prehistoric kind of animal. So they caught on because they couldn't help it come out. They tried different ways. They tried to get some leather straps and things. They tried to get woven ropes, but they just couldn't get the lizard out. So they went to Krishna. They went to the king of the kingdom, and they excitedly told him about the creature. It says here, the lotus-eyed Supreme Lord, the maintainer of the universe, went to the well to see the lizard. So although he is that important, although he is the Lord of the universe, although he is the source of all creation, as he says in the Bhagavad Gita, he went to see what the kids had seen, this lizard. And when he got there, he saw what they were talking about. And he put his hand inside the well and very easily lifted the lizard out. So touched by the hand of the glorious Supreme Lord, the being, see, every being has a soul. And that soul is neither a human, nor an animal, nor an insect. The soul is separate from all of that. The Bhagavad Gita is the only text, ancient text, that talks about the soul. And when it talks about the soul, it talks about how the soul enters a body, giving it life. Just as when electricity comes into a light bulb, that light bulb lights up. Similarly, when the soul enters the body comes alive. That's called birth. And when that same soul leaves the body, that body drops dead. The soul is the life force, the life-giving energy that makes the body come alive. That soul is the living aspect of who we are. The body is never living as such. It is made alive by the presence of the soul. In the absence of the soul, that same body with the same heart, mind, organs stops functioning. It's not because the organs stopped functioning that we died. It's because the soul no longer able to use the body for whatever reason, either because of an injury or because of a disease, no longer able to use this body, left it. That's what we call death. But for the soul, Krishna says very clearly, there is never birth nor death, nor having once been does it ever cease to be. There are four things in this world, in this universe actually, that are eternal. The first thing that is eternal is God. And Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, meaning the living entity. So the second thing that is eternal in this universe is the living entity, you and I. All living entities, all creatures, all souls. That includes the soul that is present in the animal. That soul that is in the animal may once have been in the body of a human. The body that the soul that is now in a soul resides to carry out its karma and its desires. So the soul in this way moves from one body to another. In fact, we all have different bodies even in the course of this life. There was a time when I had a baby body. Yes, I didn't look like this. And that baby may have been that small. And then grew up, became a toddler, an infant, a preteen, then a teenager, then a young adult, then it went on to middle age and kept on growing. So we kept changing bodies. These bodies have been changing every few years. Well, some say that every few months certain cells and certain organs are completely changed. Like all this, the old cells have died and new cells have come in their place. And some organs in our body take longer, maybe a year, maybe two. But altogether, around 7 years, every cell in our body is new. So it's literally like we have a new body every 7 years. The body is constantly changing. And in this changing scenario, we find ourselves still identifying with it. So how is it that even though my body has changed, and even though I no longer look the way I did when I was a baby, I still think this is me? That's because something has not changed. That something which did not change, that is the soul. So the living entity is eternal. God is eternal. Nature is eternal. Now this was known in the Vedic time. They knew that Prakriti or nature is eternal. The same thing was said by Einstein. E is equal to mc squared. It talks about how matter cannot be created or destroyed. It is eternal. Ultimately, it is energy. So God God is eternal, the living entity is eternal, nature is eternal, and time is eternal. Four things. Eternal means they never cease to exist. They have always existed. So people ask the question, well, who created God? Nothing created God. In fact, nothing created you. You, the soul, have always existed. God has always existed. Time has always existed. And nature, this material world, has always existed. Now, it may not always be manifest. The material world may go back into energy that is called avyakta. Avyakta means the unmanifest. And then again, it is manifest. So that is the way the Vedas describe it, that material nature, as we see it now, is manifest. But there was a time when it was unmanifest. And that cycle keeps going on over a period of millions of years. Likewise, there was a time when you had a body like now, and then there'll be a time when you leave this body and you will have no body for a while. You will be without a body, you will just be a soul. And then until you get your next body, and then you come into that. So there is a time when you are manifest and when you are not manifest. But just because you no longer have a body doesn't mean you died. No, we do not die. Death is an illusion. We are neither born nor do we die. We always existed. And therefore Krishna says in the Gita, the wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. The wise person sees this. The wise person knows this. He knows that all that is happening in our life, which seems so serious to us, which seems so problematic, which seems such a big deal, is just a story. In fact, if you look back at your life, all of it, whatever you remember, is just a bunch of memories in your brain. The incidents are gone. The incidents that happened a minute ago are gone. What to say, an hour ago, or 5 hours, or 5 days, or 5 years, or 50 years ago. They're gone. And where can you find them? Nowhere. You could have taken a photograph of that time, yes, or a video in today's time. You could do that. But as such, at best, it's in your memory. And in your memory, it's just bits of data, which when you die is gone. So where is the past? And even the future is something you're imagining, thinking, conceiving. It can happen, it may happen, but it may not happen. And so some will say, well, what matters is the present moment. And yes, of course. But this present moment is also eternal, because the present moment is always present and it is eternally the present moment. So you see, time is therefore eternal. Now, this lizard was touched by the hand of that Supreme Lord, that Supreme Being, the source of all creation. And when he touched it, the lizard gave up its lizard form and assumed the form of a resident of the heavenly planets. The Vedas talk about alien beings in what are called the heavenly planets. These are planets where people are far more beautiful than us humans here on earth. They have much longer lives. And so out of that lizard is emerging a deva, a demigod, a person who is from the heavenly planets. His complexion was beautifully colored and like molten gold. And he was adorned with wonderful ornaments, clothes, and garlands. Krishna understood the situation, but for the sake of people in general who were around, he inquired as follows, "Who are you, O greatly fortunate one? Seeing your excellent form, I think you must surely be an exalted demigod." Now remember, in Vedic literature, we do not talk about many gods. Demigods are exalted beings, alien beings from other planets, but they are not the supreme Godhead, the God of all gods. That is Krishna, the all-attractive one, Bhagavan. He is the supreme Godhead, according to the Vedas, and according to the Bhagavad Gita, where he himself says so. So then Krishna asks this deva, this demigod, he says, why what past activity, why what past karma were you born or brought into this condition? It seems you did not deserve such a fate. O good soul, we are eager to know about you, so please inform us about yourself, if you think this is the proper time and place to tell us. Now, I want to take away from here something very important. All of us were born into various situations. Some of us were born very wealthy. Some were born very poor. Some were born with beautiful bodies and some with very ordinary bodies. Some of us were born with great intelligence and some not so much. Some were born with creative instincts, like an artist, while others were intellectuals, while others were people in technology. But Why were you born the way you were born in whatever situation you were born in? Around you, as you ate and as you drank and as your mind developed and as you gained various inputs and learned various things, your mind developed, your body developed, and you became the person that you are. But why does it have the capabilities it has? In today's time, if you go out to buy a car, let's say a Tesla, that's a different car than a gas-driven car. So firstly, its capabilities are different. It's the way it functions is entirely different. Then again, within that car, let's say the Tesla, you've got various models with various speeds. There is the ordinary one. There's the one that works with all four wheels. And then there's the one that has the powerful engine that can go from, I don't remember the numbers, but like really, really fast, where it feels like you're in a rocket ship. So why these different capabilities? Well, they cost different amounts of money, right? Some are very expensive. And some cars you can buy for very little. Some of the gas-driven ones, which are, and you can buy a used car also. And that's even cheaper. So who's going to buy what will depend upon their budget, their capability. And that budget is your karma. And your karma is the things you did in your previous life. So that gave you the purchasing power of a particular kind of body. So the reason you have the kind of body, mind, intelligence that you have today is because of your past karma. And your present actions are creating your future karma, which is going to determine what your bank balance is going to be and what kind of body you can get based on your activities now. What are the things that build up your karma and make you have good karma? Those are things which you do in the service of others. That builds good karma, whether you give in charity, whether you give knowledge. Though that is at the highest level, the giving of knowledge, and especially the knowledge of spirituality. Then you are giving a person the highest good. But if you are taking from others, if you are exploiting others, if you are cheating others, if you are, in some way or another diminishing them, then you're engaging in bad karma. And that karma is depleting whatever good karma you have. Maybe you have good karma now. So sometimes you see very rich people doing very bad things. You may wonder, well, how is it that these rich people are able to do such terrible things? Well, they're probably depleting their good karma. They were born in a certain situation, they acquired a certain level of intelligence, and with that intelligence they were able to manifest a certain amount of wealth. But now over time they're gradually diminishing that. Of course, some of them engage in other pious activities still and still gain some good karma. Good karma will not only give you a good or better body and a better situation in your next life, it may give you good situations even in this life. But good karma does one thing further. Your good karma could also elevate you to other planets, such as where this deva, this demigod, comes from, the higher planets, the heavenly planets, the places where life is even far better than it is here on earth. We're all longing to go to those planets. In fact, many people would love to go to other ends of the universe. They would love to find life out there. Well, the instinct to do that is because it is so. There is life out there, and there are planets that are far better than this one. On the Earth planet, there is an equal amount of suffering and an equal amount of happiness. So we're kind of like tossed between these two extremes all the time. But in the heavenly planets, it's considered that there is far greater happiness and very little of unhappiness. And then there are hellish planets where there is much greater suffering than you have even on Earth. But none of them is permanent. Krishna says even if you go to the highest planet or the lowest planet, all of them are places of suffering wherein repeated birth and death take place. But he says one who returns to my abode never returns to this temporary and miserable world. So in other words, there is a place outside of this material world, outside of these higher and lower planets, outside of this material creation, in which we can live eternally. All religions indicate this. However, very few of them can give you a clear picture of what that looks like. In the Vedic literature, it is very clearly described. It is described as Vaikuntha, the place where there is no birth, death, old age, or disease, where the soul has its own swarup, its own form, its own beautiful spiritual form. And there is no need to struggle. There is no suffering, because the soul does not need food. It does not need a house. It does not need a car. It does not need a bank balance. It does not need to take a job. It does not need to do any of those things. It can choose to merge into the light, or it can choose to live with the Supreme Lord as one of his associates. Those choices are up to us, and there are many choices like that. I won't go into the details of that. I want to come back to our story here. So this Deva, when questioned by Krishna, Krishna's forms are unlimited. The king, with his helmet as dazzling as the sun, bowed down to Krishna and replied as follows. His name was Nriga, N-R-I-G-A, Nriga. Nriga said, I am a king known as Nriga, the son of Ikshvaku. Perhaps you've heard of me, when lists of charitable men were recited. What could possibly be unknown to you, O Master? With vision undisturbed by time, you witness the minds of all living beings. This is an amazing statement here. Firstly, that we understand the idea that God is all-knowing, omniscient. So what could possibly be unknown to you? Then he says, with vision undisturbed by time. You see, for all of us, our knowing is impeded by time. We do not remember what it was like to be in our mother's womb. We barely remember anything of what it was like to be a baby or a child. Some of us might have a little bit of remembrance, but for the most part, I certainly don't remember any of that. I've got photographs that tell me, but I personally don't remember. Some of us even forget what we did a few days ago, or a few hours ago, or where we kept our keys. We forget things. What to say of previous lifetimes? And our previous lifetime may have been just a few years ago. If you are in your 20s now, your previous lifetime was a little over 20 years ago, but you can't remember it. If you're 50, then your previous lifetime was 50 years ago. Well, in terms of eternal time, that was just yesterday. But we don't remember it. In contrast, the Supreme Being, God, Krishna, his vision is undisturbed by time. And he's not only aware of his own life and past lives, but also the minds of all living beings. Therefore, in this, we see King Nriga saying, with vision undisturbed by time, you witness the minds of all living beings. Krishna is the witness. Many people talk in today's time about witness consciousness. Well, who is that witness? Who is the witness? Who is witnessing? If there is a witness consciousness, then who is witnessing? Oh, no, there's no one witnessing. There's just a consciousness. And that consciousness cannot be a being? You're telling me it's not possible for consciousness to be personified? Why not? Expand your mind, my friend. Everything is possible. So then the king continues, nevertheless, on your order, I will speak. I gave in charity. This was a very, very generous king. He would give in charity. He says, I gave in charity as many cows as there are grains of sand on the earth, stars in the heavens, or drops in a rain shower. Why was he giving cows? Because a cow is a very miraculous being. I know in today's bloody, and this is awful what people do in today's time. They milked the cow by hand, very lovingly treated it, petted it, treated it like their own family member, made sure that the baby was well fed, and made sure that that cow ate only grass and not some stupid corn and other stuff that they feed the cows now. No. They held the cow as sacred. Why? Because the milk that it was giving was enough to sustain life if need be. It was a complete food in itself. Then again, they've changed the breeds of cows and they've done all kinds of stuff. But the original cows, which are now referred to as the A2 cows, the ones that come out of India, are known to actually produce a milk which is not troublesome to the stomach or the does not cause lactose intolerance. It's a whole different topic. I'm not going to go any further down that road. But he was taking young, brown, milk-laden cows who were well-behaved, beautiful, and endowed with good qualities, who were all acquired honestly, and who had gilded horns, means covered with either gold or silver, had silver-plated hoofs, and decorations of fine ornamental cloths and garlands. Such were the cows, along with their calves, that I gave in charity. So who did he give these cows to, and why? He says, I first honored the Brahmins, who were the recipients of my charity. Why was he giving to the Brahmins? The Brahmins in Vedic society are the priests. Why are the priests important? Because their job is to teach people about spirituality. They are not supposed to take up any job. They are not supposed to take any salary. They are supposed to live only by whatever donations are given to them. Why is that? Because they are meant to be truth tellers. They are meant to be able to speak the truth about God, the absolute truth, and to not distort it in any way based on someone who's paying them a salary or someone who they are obliged to. In this way, they can speak the truth to everyone. And in fact, they were not supposed to keep anything that they had in excess either. If they would keep what they needed for their sustenance and survival and give away the rest. So they in turn were engaging in charity. There were 6 things that were recommended for the Brahmin. Yajan. They were supposed to do yagya, that is the worship, whether that was a fire sacrifice or for different ceremonies or rituals. But it also means yagya as in the worship of God. Yajan, teaching others how to worship. Patan, they were meant to study the Vedas and teach it to others. And dan pratigraha, meaning receive in charity and then give in charity, keeping only what was required to maintain body and soul together. So he says, I first honored the Brahmins who were recipients of my charity by decorating them with fine ornaments. Those most exalted Brahmins whose families were in need were young and possessed of excellent character and qualities. See, to be a Brahmin meant that you had to live by a very high set of qualities and set of standards that were set in the Vedas. You had to be exemplary in every way. Not like in today's time. And the reason the whole Brahminical culture degraded was because instead of being based upon one's qualities, it became based upon one's birth. So if you were born in the family of a Brahmin, you were automatically a Brahmin. That was nonsense. That is not how Krishna created. Krishna says, I have created this system of varnashram. So these varnas, one of which is the Brahmin, are based upon your guna and karma, your aptitude and your actions. So the person who has the actions of a Brahmin and the aptitude of a Brahmin is to be recognized as such. Not one who doesn't do the work of a Brahmin and doesn't have the qualities. The Vedic literature is not about just believing something. It is not a faith-based system. It is very much about a tangible result, tangible qualities. If they talk about moksha or liberation, it is something that you experience here and now. If they talk about spiritual benefits in the Vedas or the Bhagavad Gita, those benefits can and are experienced here and now, in this world now. Not immediately. It takes practice. It takes a certain amount of dedication and devotion and work. But yes, one begins to see the results. So then he continues describing the character and qualities of these Brahmins. He said they were dedicated to truth, famous for their austerity. The truth doesn't only mean speaking the truth about, to push us. They will tempt the mind. The mind will latch on to these different ups and downs, and you will be miserable and you will be happy when things go your way, and when things don't go your way, you'll be feeling terrible. That's all mentally concocted stuff. Austerity means to go beyond the mind, beyond the dualities, beyond all the positives and negatives, the ups and downs, and to tolerate whatever is happening, be okay with it. Not easy. Absolutely not easy. But that's why it calls for austerity. One practices. Like, for example, getting up early in the morning, that's an austerity. Having a cold shower is an austerity. Eating certain foods like vegetarian foods is an austerity. Abstaining from intoxicants is an austerity. In today's time, it's so natural to do all the other things that are pleasure-giving. But the person who wants to advance in spiritual life must engage in austerity, giving up the pleasures of the world as much as possible, and engaging in developing one's spiritual self and finding the pleasure within. If you are holding on to the external, it will be very difficult for you to find the internal pleasure. There is immense pleasure within you. There is an ocean of pleasure within you, but you're not tapping into it because you're addicted to your desires and to the pleasures of the world. I'm not saying I'm free of that, but I struggle with it. I recognize it. I recognize that little by little by little, I have got to start letting go of the things that I am attached to and addicted to, and the pleasures of the world and my desires. Why? Not because I want some kind of, just want to suffer or something. No, the suffering's already there in the world. I don't have to make it any worse. So you say, oh no, I just need some relief. I just need to chill. I just need to relax. But the real relaxation, the real chilling, the real sustenance that holds you and really satisfies you is what you get from reading these kind of texts, from listening to these kind of talks, from having the mantras and the chanting and the various practices that bring you that inner peace. And once that inner peace becomes more solidified in your mind and in your heart, then it follows you everywhere. It becomes who you are. Your soul awakens, and as your soul awakens, its qualities begin to shine through. Instead of your mind, instead of your ego, instead of your intelligence, which have been ruling the roost up till now. So he talks about how these Brahmins were dedicated to truth. They were famous for their austerity. They were vastly learned in the Vedic literatures, books like the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. And they were saintly in their behavior. What is one of the key qualities of a saintly person? Does it mean they've got to have dreadlocks? Does it mean they've got to be wearing certain robes? No, not at all. These Brahmins may have been very likely family persons who lived as householders. But what is saintly behavior? Saintly behavior is where, like we said earlier, you're equanimous, where you're equipoised in various circumstances. You're not affected by situations. You see people as the same, samadrishti. You do not find one to be higher or lower. You don't idolize one human and put down another. No, not at all. That is not saintly behavior. Saintly behavior is where you see the soul of each person. And you see them as a soul, not as a man, not as a woman, not as a child, not as rich or as poor. Though they might be all of those, but that's not how you see. You pierce through the veil of reality, the veil of what you see, and you see to the core of that being, their soul. And you recognize that that soul which lies within them lies within each and every being, every animal, every creature, every person, including yourself. And therefore you don't harm any of them. You don't kill them, you don't harm them, you don't disrespect them, you don't try to put them down, you don't judge them. That is an evolved person. You also recognize that that same energy of the soul is in its inanimate form present all around you and therefore you treat nature with the highest of reverence and respect. Such persons need to be given the highest honor in society. They are our teachers, they are our gurus, they are the people who show us the way because they live it, not because they just talk it, okay? Because they live it. They are there. And such were the people that he was giving in charity to. There were many of them at that time, as he describes. I gave them cows, land, gold, and houses, along with horses, elephants, and marriageable girls with maidservants, as well as sesame, silver, fine beds, clothing, jewels, furniture, and chariots. In addition, I performed Vedic sacrifices and executed various pious welfare activities. Once, a cow belonging to a certain first-class Brahmin priest wandered away and entered my herd. Unaware of this, I gave that same cow in charity to a different Brahmin. Now, when the cow's first owner saw her being led away, he said, "She's mine." And the second Brahmin, who had accepted her as a gift, replied, "No, she's mine. King Nriga gave her to me." As the two Brahmins argued, each trying to fulfill his own purpose, they came to me, that is, to the king. One of them said, "You gave me this cow," and the other said, "But you stole her from me." Hearing this, I was bewildered. Finding myself in a terrible dilemma concerning my duty in this situation, I humbly entreated both of them. I said, "I will give you 100,000 of the best cows in exchange for this one. Please give her back to me. Your good selves should be merciful to me, your servant. I did not know what I was doing. Please save me from this difficult situation, or I'll surely fall into a terrible state." The present owner of the cow said, "I don't want anything in exchange for this cow, O king," and he went away. The other Brahmin also said, "I don't want even 10,000 more cows, more than you are offering," and he too went away. Thus, disagreeing with the king's proposal, both of them left the palace in anger, thinking that their lawful possession had been usurped. Now, anger is a tricky thing. And while I told you about how evolved these persons were, clearly they had some work to do further. We might evolve to a certain degree, and yet we may still have some flaws. We may have our own flaws. But the poor king was stuck between their egos. Srila Siddhar Swami explains that the term used earlier, first-class Brahmin, this indicates a Brahmin who has stopped accepting charity and would thus refuse to accept even 100,000 cows in exchange for the cow that has been improperly given away. So he's giving a whole different twist now, that because they were highly advanced Brahmins, they didn't really care about the numbers. It was just a matter of principle for them. So then the king continues. He says to Krishna, he says, "O master of the universe, the agents of Yamaraj, taking advantage of the opportunity thus created, later carried me to his abode." So Yamaraj is known to be the one in charge of death. And his agents come to take the soul. And then Yamaraj is the one who decides where that soul goes, what their karma is, and what kind of body they're going to get based on that. So Yamaraj questioned me. He says, "My dear king, do you wish to experience the results of your sins, your bad karma, first, or those of your piety? Indeed, I see no end to the dutiful charity you have performed, or to your consequent enjoyment that you will receive in the radiant heavenly planets," because that's what he would have got for all the incredible charity and piety that he did earlier. So the king replied, "First, my lord, let me suffer my sinful reactions." Then Yamaraj said, "Then fall." At once I fell, and while falling I saw myself becoming a lizard. "O Krishna, as your servant, I was devoted to the Brahmins and generous to them, and I always hankered for your audience. Therefore, even till now, I have never forgotten my past life." Now, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, he says, on the whole, Nriga had not developed his God consciousness, his Krishna consciousness. Thus, Krishna conscious person develops love of God and frees himself from all material desire, anya abhilashita shunyam. Such a person does not engage in pious or impious activities which lead to karmic bondage. This is a powerful lesson here. Prabhupada is pointing out that it is not that we should be engaging in either pious or impious activities, good karma or bad karma, because both of them lead to bondage. Bondage means what? Bondage to the world, bondage to birth, death, old age, and disease. The more we cultivate our desires, or even the more good deeds we do, the more we become bound to this world. Whether you do bad deeds or you do good deeds, either way you are bound to the world. The idea is to engage in deeds that cause moksha or liberation. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that very, very clearly. And he says, for the most beautiful deity of the Supreme Lord, and also wanted copies of such scriptures as the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Being very generous, Nriga arranged for these things, and the devotee was so satisfied that he blessed the king. My dear king, may you have the audience of the Supreme Lord. Now, this is a big deal. The blessing that you may have audience of God, that you may see him face to face, is highly coveted by those who are on this path of bhakti or devotion. That one day I will have darshan, I will have with my own eyes, I will be able to see God. Because the truth is that one who is able to see God in that way loses all interest in the world. Then you know for sure this is what you've desired all along, and your desire is now fulfilled. You feel that sense of completeness, that I've come home, and there is no other thing for me to do in this world except to love and be loved by that Supreme Being, Krishna. So, from that time on, the king Nriga desired to see Krishna. Now, as he beholds the wondrous sight of the all-attractive one, he prays, O Almighty One, how is it that my eyes see you before me? You are the Supreme Soul, whom the greatest masters of mystic yoga can meditate upon within their pure hearts only by employing the spiritual eye of the Vedic wisdom. Then how, O transcendental Lord, are you directly visible to me, since my intelligence has been blinded by the severe tribulations of material life? Only one who has finished his material entanglement in this world should be able to see you. Now, I want you to think about this for a moment. Why do you think he was able to see Krishna? I don't know if you picked up the earlier part of the story, where he had engaged in helping someone who wanted to build a temple, and within that temple was going to be a deity of the Supreme Lord. And he also helped this person distribute copies of the Vedas and scriptures, such as Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, to people all over. And so because he'd engaged in that kind of devotional service, that person had blessed him, saying, may you have darshan, may you have one day be able to see God face to face. And so that's why this was happening. And he's just bewildered. He's like, how is this possible? How could it be happening? Oh my goodness. Only one who has finished his material entanglement in this world should be able to see you. He says, O Deva Deva, God of gods, O Jagannatha, master of the universe, please be my master. O Govinda, with the same merciful glance you used to enchant the cows and the gopis and all the people of Vrindavan, please make me yours. You can do this because you are Purushottama. The Purusha Uttama means the ultimate being, the highest being, the supreme form of Godhead. O Narayan, since you are the source and foundation of all living entities, please be my support, even though I am an unworthy living entity. O Rishikesh, please make my senses your own. O Punya Shloka. So Krishna has many, many names, and he's using all these different names very beautifully. O Punya Shloka, he who is glorified with transcendental verses, you have now become famous as the deliverer of Nriga. O Achyuta, infallible one, please never be lost to my mind. Look at his prayers. Please never be lost to my mind. May I always think of you. May I always remember you. O Avyaya, O undiminishing one, you will never diminish in my mind. O Krishna, please permit me to depart for the world of the demigods. Wherever I live, O Master, may my mind always take shelter of your feet. So although he calls Krishna Master, notice that Krishna is not there as a king trying to rule over him and tell him what to do and what not to do. He's just there as his witness, loving him, caring for him, trying to help him. I offer my repeated obeisances, obey you, Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. You are the source of all beings, the supreme absolute truth, the possessor of unlimited potencies, the master of all spiritual disciplines. Srila Sridhar Swami comments that King Nriga here offers his obeisance to Brahmane Ananta Shaktaye, Brahman, that is the absolute truth, who is unchanged in spite of performing activities. See, when we perform activities, change. Our actions mold us. Sometimes we do things that are beneficial to the world, and sometimes we do things that are beneficial to ourselves. Sometimes we're selfish, and sometimes we're selfless. Sometimes we give, and sometimes we receive. But in all our actions are shaping who we are, because we observe our own actions, and those actions then tell us something about ourselves, and thus our ego is formed. Unfortunately, in the case of Krishna, he is unchanged in spite of performing activities, because he's always the same. Since ancient times, Sridhar Swami writes, Western philosophers have puzzled over the question of how God can be unchanging and yet perform activities. Here the words Ananta Shaktaye, which describes the Supreme Being as the possessor of unlimited potency. Thus, although his infinite potencies, through his infinite potencies, he can perform innumerable activities without changing his essential nature. Now, having spoken this, thus King Nrig circumambulated, walked around Krishna, that's called circumambulating, and touched his crown to the Supreme Lord's feet. Granted permission to depart, King Nriga then boarded a wonderful celestial airplane, as all the people present looked on. So, this is the time of the Vimanas. They had celestial airplanes. And many people are described in the Bhagavatam as boarding an airplane and leaving for either the heavenly planets or for the spiritual world. This is not something we come across in today's time, but they're described in great detail. There are people who, from this earthly realm, go and visit people in the heavenly planets. They don't do that in an airplane which is run by gasoline or nuclear energy or any of that stuff. These are celestial. Celestial means they're of a different vibration, of a different energy, which can transport us instantly. We don't go through the process of aging. But yes, there is a difference in time. There is what is called time diminishing or something like that. There's a term they use in nuclear physics. The Supreme Godhead Sri Krishna, who is especially devoted to the Brahmins and his devotees, who embodies the essence of Dharma, then said, the property of a Brahmin is indigestible, like fire, even by kings who try to enjoy it, pressuring themselves or presuming themselves to be lords. What he's saying here is that one should never take the property of a Brahmin, of an evolved being, never steal from such a person. Because that property which you're trying to take away from that person is indigestible. You will not be able to digest it, like trying to digest fire, right? You may think you're very powerful, you may think you can handle it, but no. Krishna says, I do not consider, there's a poison called halal to be real poison. He says, this is the deadliest poison which Shiva drank and was unharmed, because that poison has an antidote. But a Brahmin's property, when stolen, can truly be called poison, for it has no antidote in this world. Poison only kills the person who ingests it, and an ordinary fire may be extinguished with water. But the fire generated stealing a Brahmin's property burns the thief's entire family down to the root. If a person enjoys a Brahmin's property without receiving due permission, that property destroys 3 generations of his family. But if he takes it by force or gets the government or other outsiders to help him usurp it, 10 generations of his ancestors and 10 generations of his descendants are all destroyed. Kings blinded by royal opulence fail to foresee their own downfall. This happened in India. We had invasions by the Mughals, invasions by various groups of Muslims that came and killed tens of thousands of Brahmins and looted their property and the property that was found in the temples at that time. It was horrible. They may have fallen into poverty or is on the brink of doing so through war. What is the consequence of having killed all those Brahmins? Unfortunately, the people of today's time are seeing that consequence, but the karma is being carried forward by their family members, by their generations, by their culture, by their religion. It is being carried into the present time. And what Krishna is saying will happen regardless of what anyone thinks or believes. So he says, kings blinded by royal opulence. So those were kings who came in and, did all these atrocities, which was worse than even what Hitler did. Far worse, in fact. Many, many times more in terms of the brutality, in terms of the amount of murders, in terms of the amount of looting that was done. Kings blinded by royal opulence fail to foresee their own downfall. Childishly hankering to enjoy a Brahmin's property, they are actually hankering to go to hell. Whether it be his own gift or someone else's, a person who steals a Brahmin's property will take birth as a worm in feces. I do not desire Brahmins. He says, I, as Krishna, do not desire a Brahmin's wealth. Those who lust after it become short-lived and are defeated. They lose their kingdoms and become snakes who trouble others. My dear followers, never treat a learned Brahmin harshly, even if he has sinned, even if he attacks you physically or repeatedly curses you. Always continue to offer him respect. So in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a statement to this effect, which makes it very clear. And there Krishna says, even if one, this is the Bhagavad Gita, and he says, even if one commits the most abominable acts, right? He says here, apichet sudarachara. So when you do, su means very much, durachar means terrible actions. Even if a person does the most terrible of actions, such a person must be considered saintly. Bhajate mam ananya bhak. If he is engaged in serving me, in devotional service, devotion to God, then such a person must be considered a sadhu. Sadhu eva samantavya. He is to be considered saintly. So what was that? Even if a person commits the most abominable action, if he is engaged in serving God, he is to be considered saintly. And so in other words, the idea is do not judge anyone. It's not just someone who is saintly. It's not just someone who's a Brahmin, but do not criticize or judge or belittle anyone. In the purport, it's written, once pure consciousness becomes polluted by material activities, pure consciousness can be revived by the process of sacrifice, charity, pious activities, etc., and especially by chanting the name and glories of the Supreme Lord. However, if in the process one offends a Brahmin or a Vaishnava, it is very difficult to make progress in one's spiritual path. Srila Prabhupada emphasizes that Krishna is fiercely protective of his devotees. He cannot tolerate any of. So this kind of offense or aparadha is referred to by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the mad elephant offense, meaning that if there was a field of sugarcane and a mad elephant came, then that elephant would just destroy the entire field of whatever was growing out there, right? Sugarcane or whatever else. It would trample all the creepers of devotion that person might have been cultivating. Even if you were on the spiritual path, if you engage in offending a devotee or Brahmin or a devotee of God, then that is like destroying all your spiritual progress. That person will not be affected because they usually don't take offense, but it is God who takes offense on it because he loves his people. He loves those who have devoted themselves to him. And so he takes offense on their behalf, just as you would take offense if your family member was insulted. Even if your dog was insulted, you'd take offense, right? And so it is with God. This analogy vividly illustrates how offenses against devotees can destroy one's spiritual progress. Just as a mad elephant can wreak havoc on a delicate creeper, severing its connection to the life-giving earth, so too can an offense of a devotee to a devotee or a guru or the holy name sever our connection with Krishna, who is the source of all spiritual nourishment. This offense can take the creeper of the person's devotion lifeless. And anyway, it goes on about that. So I wanted to kind of really talk about an example out here where we came across in the earlier part of the Bhagavatam, if you were there, and that was about a king called Ambarish. And this king Ambarish, there was a sage called Durvasa who came to him. And this sage was very proud and arrogant. I won't get into the whole story, but he basically got mad at the king because the king didn't serve him food in the proper way at the proper time, and the king couldn't because, long story, all right, I'm not going to go into it. But basically, even though the sage was a guest in the king's house, he offended the king, and the king was a great devotee of Vishnu, Krishna. And so now, Krishna's Sudarshan chakra, Krishna has this chakra, this disc that protects his devotees. That chakra came and started chasing the sage Durvasa. And Durvasa was like running all over the universe, trying to get away from Krishna's Sudarshan chakra. And he even went to Shiva, and Shiva said, I can't help you, you got to go to Vishnu. And then Durvasa went to Vishnu. Please help me, your Sudarshan chakra, this disc is coming to kill me. Vishnu says, I can't help you either. You got to go back to that king who you offended and ask his forgiveness. And that is the process. So if you do end up offending a devotee or a brahmin or a lover of God, please have all humility and offer your apologies and ask for their forgiveness. They're the only one who can forgive you. Nobody else can. Therefore, Prabhupada writes that one should be very careful about committing offenses to a Brahmin or a Vaishnav. Just as Krishna says, next is in conclusion, Krishna says, just as I have always carefully bowed down, it says, I always carefully bow down to the Brahmins. So also should all of you. I will punish anyone who acts otherwise. When a Brahmin's property is stolen, even unknowingly, it certainly causes the person who takes it to fall down, just as the Brahmin's cow did to Nriga. Having thus instructed the residents of Dwarka, Krishna, the purifier of all the worlds, entered his palace. Srila Sridhar Swami states that the story of King Nriga is meant to give sober instruction to all those who are proud of their opulences. So a lot of times people become very proud when they have opulences. That is to say, if you are very intelligent, that's an opulence. If you're very beautiful, that's an opulence. If you're very wealthy, that's an opulence. Right? If you're very renounced, that's an opulence. If you're very strong. But Krishna is the source of all opulences. He is Krishna. It means he is the source of all opulences, all knowledge, all fame, all beauty, all strength, everything comes from him. But when we get these opulences, we become very arrogant and proud. Someone who's exceptionally beautiful or exceptionally intelligent will be proud and arrogant. And that becomes our downfall. So this is a sober instruction to all of us that no matter what opulences you have wealth, you have knowledge, you have fame, whatever you have, please understand that it's a gift from God. And use it in the service of others. And live with humility. There is nothing better that we can give to ourselves and to the world. Our humility, our compassion, our kindness. With that, I'm going to end. Jai Shri Krishna. Hare Krishna. Does anyone have any questions? Would anyone like to ask anything? Please write down your comments. If you're in Instagram, there's a bunch of you in Instagram. There's a bunch of people on Zoom. If you have any questions, please write them down. If not, and you're watching later on, please write down your comments, or rather your questions in the comments. I'd be happy to answer them. I do enjoy questions, just want you to know that. And I'd be happy to hear from you anytime. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, everyone who's here. Appreciate all you guys and your support, all your love. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Good night to everybody. And
Have
I'll
a
see you
good
next
night.
week. Take care.